Hello everybody, thank you for attending my presentation. Like she already said, my name is Aleksandr. I work in Adform. I work as a senior QA specialist and both product owner of data governance program. So today my presentation will be not only about the testing the data, but also assuring the quality of your data on a whole different level from the governance perspective. For those of you who don't know what Adform does, we provide the full stack AdTech platform. Basically, we play on the both sides of the fence in online advertising. We help advertisers to advertise their new products. We help publishers to monetize the showing of the ads. Of course, we enable our clients to target a specific audience with their advertising, provide full analytics of the data, and so on and so forth. This actually results in huge amounts of transactions of data for us that we have to collect, store, process, and ultimately present to our clients. If you would Google the big data growth and click on the images, you would see a bunch of hockey stick type graphs showing the enormous trends of the data all over the world. Well, in this context, Adform is no different. By mid-2016, we've managed to collect the same amount of data that we did over the previous decade. And of course, this poses a challenge, not only from the data warehouse perspective, but also from the testing perspective. Like, how do we know that we're not holding a petabytes of crap? This brings us to the data quality definitions. Okay? So data only produces value when it meets the quality standards. For those of you who have already been on my presentations, so it's not a deja vu, I took some parts from my earlier presentations and put it here, so I'll repeat myself. I wanted to do more of data governance, but I was told to talk about testing. Okay. So in Adform we use mainly quality definitions as consistency, validity, timeliness, and completeness. We'll go over through each of them in a second. First one was data consistency. Let's say you're holding petabytes of data. Of course, it's being stored on the different storages all over your system, where storage type is typically defined by the usage of the data. You can use Hadoop to store log level data or master data as a cheaper storage, but it's a bit slow. You can use some analytical databases like Rollup, Vertica, that allows you to report in a very fast way your data. The tricky part here is that all of these storages are based on different technologies, but still they have to contain the same exact data. You cannot show one data in your reports, one statistical data in your reports, and do invoices for the clients using the other one. It's a good idea to have this process of keeping all of your data consistent. It can be either totals, just checking that your totals among all of the system parts are okay. So, like I was saying, it's a good idea to have this process in place when you start having at least two types of storages. Because the number will grow, and by the time you'll have 3, it will already be too late to implement this process, because it can be and will be a major headache for yourself. It's also a good idea to have some definition of the golden record, the one that you would refer to. Well, like, let's say in Hadoop, I think that my data is 100% correct, and everything that doesn't correspond to it is off. So yeah, well, having this process in place, we've managed to track down almost each and every bug that led to inconsistencies. So nowadays, the bugs that lead inconsistencies are basically pretty rare, but they're also resolved in a very fast manner. Other definition would be the data validity. Well, if you're collecting billions of records per day, there's no possible way you can be sure that this data is okay, right? So what we do, we apply sampling algorithm for this. Basically, what kind of data we collect, right? You go to some website, you get served with a banner, you see the ad, and basically what it does, it just it's an HTTP request that results in a transaction for us. So that's a very simple thing to do for the robots. You just interact with test banners in your production environment. After some time, and you can use all bunch of tools, right, for that. And after that, you can use other robots to check, as an end client would do, from the report's perspective. It could be a WebDriver, it could be some other stuff, anyway. So, since you know which exact data have you generated, and it's not just duplicated or missed among the billions of other records, you can be pretty much sure that your data is intact. So yeah, seeing these exact numbers. Next one would be the data completeness. This is a very simple, stupid way to check if your data is okay, but it works. It really can scan and filter out any records that you will presume as broken or incomplete. You can go crazy with these queries, like saying if this is this type of record, it should have this and shouldn't have that. This kind of value should never be negative, and so on and so forth. So basically, just scanning all over your data helps you find some incomplete records. And last but not least is the data timeliness. According to our SLAs, after data was generated, it should appear in the reports in no longer than 90 minutes. The real world scenario would be, again, you're going to some web page, that has a banner that is served by ad form. In no longer than 90 minutes, the statistics for banner view statistics for that banner are getting updated. So we can use the same approach as we did in sampling. You can generate the data on the schedule, and this way you would know that your data is not only precise, but it's also on time. Of course, if data is delayed for a bit, it's not crucial, and most of your clients won't even notice it. But still, it just increases the gap until you notice that something is not going well inside of your system before you apply a hotfix. So just having all of these just checking the data by 4 of these criteria may give you a sense that, okay, we're pretty much okay. But in terms of the real data quality, that would not be enough, because in terms of quality assurance, we are only focusing on the delivery, technical delivery of the data, but we're not focusing on the data context. So this brings me to the next part of my presentation, which is the data governance. So it's been like half a year, I think, since we began this activity in our company. So the main goals of this program was to maintain the value of your data assets, avoiding possible complications, data losses, duplications, improper data disclosure that can, of course, lead you to some loss of reputation, and of course distinguishing on the data that has the most value and focus on testing only that one. And of course, yes, be compliant with regulations, but we'll get to that later. So in terms of data governance, we would have some additional test quality criteria. First one would be that data is considered to be of high quality if it fits for its intended use in operations, decision making and planning. So can you do normal business decisions based on your data? The data should correctly represent the real world construct to which it refers. Imagine Google Maps, right? So the data that they provide, should 100% correspond to the real world construct, okay? So basically that's pretty much constant data, but still, it would totally ruin your experience if you would use Google Maps to check some place and it would be a totally different place, right? For some other domains, like, I don't know, stock exchange, right? So data that was correct, some problems. data that was correct only an hour ago may not be relevant anymore because you know, the prices have changed over the time, so the key factor would be time. So data timeliness again. And of course, with increased volumes, the data should sustain the internal consistency. Now, I've mentioned that data governance goal is about maintaining the value of your data assets, right? So it is a bit weird because thinking of data as an asset, but in other words, data is the thing that actually generates the value. We use it, we resell it, we, I don't know, sell it to other people, and so on and so forth. So in economics, asset is something that can provide you value. But to make things a bit more interesting, let's think of your data as of money. And since we're with big data, so it would mean big money. So let's say that you're in charge of a pile of money, right? Instead of data. How would you assure, which first questions you would ask that the money are okay, to make sure that the money are okay, let's say? Give me some rope here, anyone.
How much in total?
How much? Excellent. Anyone else?
Where is it stored?
Okay, where does it start? Okay, excellent.
Are safe?
Are they safe? Yeah, it's money, right? Good. Any more? No? No? Can you actually, yeah, can you spend it? I would use that, yeah, I would ask that in the first place. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, my guess was that you would ask something like this. So, how much of it? No one asks, is it real? Maybe that money is not real. Who has access to it? So, in terms of safety, right? And can you actually spend the money? So, if we would take and switch the context back to match the data, so we would transform things like how much of it into the data perspective. So can we store it all, right? So data, not only it produces the value, but it also implies some costs. It can be cost of storage, cost of electrical power, maintenance, migration. If your company comes just migrates from one technology to another, the data must be migrated. So it's all right, in costs. Which actually brings me to the definition of the data retention policy. If your company has or saves some of the client's data or just collects some online advertising data, so do you have a data retention policy? Which means what's your approach on the data storage? It may be a good idea to check the contracts with your clients. Surprisingly enough, they might not state that you have to hold the data, historical data, for indefinite term. But you may still do that. It would be a good idea to monitor how much of your data is actually being used by the customers. It might be only used like 30% of your data, and another one just is holding there without any value and without any usage. Which again brings us to the data disposal process. Have you ever tried to delete the data from your production? Yes? Cool. So how was it? Did your hands get shaky? Well, most of systems are actually based and constructed to store the data, but never purge it. And at sometimes that may be a problem. Some clients, for instance, MasterCard, Amazon, they consider all of their data to be highly sensitive. They might even ask you, okay, when we're done with you, I want all my data to be purged. And that might be a legitimate reason to have this process in place. So we can offer it. Yeah, look guys, we can delete all of your data after we've done business with you. Next one was, is it real? So in terms of data, first one is that when you're in online advertising, the ability to distinguish non-human traffic can be crucial for the business. Well, since no one wants to pay for the ad that was shown to a robot, right? For instance, in our company we have a fraud detection pod, which uses predictive algorithms and so on and so forth. So this way we know which kind of data is human traffic, which one is not. And ultimately we report that one to a client. And again, test data, it cannot be held as none as a human traffic or some value, but still, it does exist in your production environment. We've done a little revision of the amount of test data in our storages, and that wasn't very good news actually, because from 1 month to another, it just came up to 20%. Of course, this doesn't break your system or something, but it's just a very good idea to know how much of your resources in production are actually used not by clients but by your tests. So it went for us, as far as I remember, for thousands of online campaigns that didn't belong to users, that just were test artifacts. And the same goes for like test artifacts that you just generate after some stress testing or load testing in your production, right? Which again is a good idea to delete, so having this data disposal process. Dead clients in your production, ever consider about that once? So some clients are done having business with you and you're still holding on to their data. That data, well, to my knowledge, has absolutely no value. And yeah, it's still lying there just like old newspapers lying on your balcony. Next question was, in terms of safety of your money, who has access to it? So, who's accessing or using your data? It can be applications that you actually develop. Well, your clients, since by contracts your clients are the owners of your data. Some client services, that may be for some investigation reasons and so on and so forth. Of course, development guys, for their own reasons. And the interesting thing here regarding the development is why are they using it and which credentials do they use when they are accessing the data from the data warehouse perspective. So what we did in our company, we've revised all of the credentials that that you can use to access the database, and contacted people that the corresponding people. So the surprise was that some of them left the company, some of them didn't even recall the last time that they used those credentials, but they are still there, and the other ones just used that database access because they didn't know any proper way to get what they wanted. So they have just been redirected to the proper tools that we just provide, and that was okay. But the problem, as I see here, is that let's say some developer has some task, he needs to go into the database, he does his job, and when his colleague needs to do the same, he asks for the same credentials, and it gets passed on and on and on. Now imagine if you're having a database that has been for years in your system, and imagine that the credentials that were used can be privileged, having full deletion, insertion rights, and so on and so forth. So you will end up having a bunch of people running around your production having a god mode. So what we did, for people that really needed that access, we gave personal accounts. So personal account means personal responsibility and of course limited rights in our production. And again, this is not an act of mistrust in our colleagues, it's just a normal security procedure which builds a secure process for accessing the data. There was a question, can we spend it? So in terms of data, we can use a definition like, can we use this data? If your company, I don't know where are you guys from, collects some data or something like that, it basically should have the privacy policy. Have you ever read your company's privacy policy? Raise your hand, who did? Okay, good. I expected no hands, actually. Okay, so basically, almost no one reads those. Even when you're getting updates, look, we have updated our privacy policy from Dropbox, from PayPal, you still don't read it, but you hold their money there, right? So if you want to be on the safe side with this, I really suggest you to take a look at your privacy policy of your company and then check how far is it from the reality. The privacy policy is basically a document which states your approach on your data collection and data usage. So how do you approach on your data collection, and so on and so forth. If you have a legal department in your organization, it's a very good place to consult with them. They will have a lot of something to tell you. So regarding the major players in the market, let's say Facebook. Last time they updated, when I checked, they updated their privacy policy only 1 month ago. Of course, they do have a lot of personal data inside of their system, but still, it's a very good process to have. Since we're all taking our privacy for granted, we don't think what kind of data can be leaked. But when you can be in charge of the data, you should always think what can go wrong if some of the data can get leaked. For instance, from Tinder. Anyone uses it? Do you want that data to leak somewhere? No? Or like Snapchat. Quite recently, they have updated their terms and service policy. That's why most of the applications, they even ask you to agree in order to so that you can still use it. What actually surprised me is when I've practiced my speech for this conference, I've used my voice recorder on my Samsung device. It was the first time I ever used it. And when I turned it on, I saw this. So it states basically that everything that I will record doesn't belong to you. We will share it to the cloud for better experience. So it's privacy everywhere right now. And some more words about the data privacy, about the PII, or personally identifiable information, is not that you cannot store it or process it, is that you have to have an agreement from a person. Now, if you're processing, let's say, payments or policy system, right, insurance system, yeah, you will have a lot of personal data, but the person will give it to you. But if you're collecting the online data, you might from time to time have some sensitive data, and you cannot get an agreement from a person. Like, imagine if you go to some website and you have a pop-up, look, we want to show you the ad. And by clicking this, we will collect some of your data, your IP, your browser, and so on and so forth. Would you click it? Sure, no. There are two kinds of personal identifiable information, which can be split to direct or indirect. Direct would be the one who leads you directly to a person. Your name, surname, if they're not common, your address, telephone number, personal code, and so on. It can be indirect, like IP. It cannot track you directly to a person. Your gender, like job position. But the key factor is that indirect personal data combined together, like if you combine IP, gender, and job position, that results to be a direct personal info. There's a lot of discussions around this right now in European Union, which kind of data is personal, which is not. It's a major headache, but still, I wanted to give you a broad overview about this. And another thing, if you in your system have some of the personal information, you might want to be ready for the GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation, that will come into force like in 2 years from now. It's a huge document that's being right now produced from the European Law Institution. But the key changes right here is that you have to give your clients the opportunity to opt out, like the right to be forgotten. So if you explicitly say that, hey guys, I don't want to be tracked by you, you have to purge his data. Again, if your data has been breached, you have to notify your clients within 72 hours. Not like the Dropbox did. Well, recently, this summer, I guess, they have notified that, look guys, we had a data breach back in 2014. And of course, for violating these regulations, there are major penalties that could be up to 4% of your company's worldwide turnover. Not the income, but the turnover. That could be huge numbers. So yeah, well, basically, that would bring me to the conclusion of my presentation. So I really hope that you will leave this room having a lot of questions inside of your head that you might want to raise inside of your organization. But I want to repeat myself. Data assets, they really do need management. So in terms of data consistency, data validations, what kind of data do you have? Who is using it? How are we giving access to it? Data quality goes hand in hand with data value. There's no point in keeping the data that has no value. When you learn to distinguish the data that has the most value, you should only focus on testing that one, because either way you will not have enough resources to check it all over. And yeah, whenever you have any doubts regarding what you should do, you should think about the data as of money. Maybe that will help. Try and visualize your work if your company will go ahead with this program, data governance. Tries to visualize your work. It could be internal webinars, emails, and presentations. Just showing the people that, look, this was wrong, and this is how now things are going in our organization, so that people would be aware. Be strategic about finding the problems. So if you stumble upon some problem which you don't know if it's a problem, let's say you found some rounding problems in your invoice system, okay, consult your billing guys or your CFO. So whenever you get a priority, you can go ahead with this. Otherwise, you will just look like a person who makes up problems. Okay, and yeah, one downside to it, even though this position of a person who drives this program is called data steward, you will be called data governor by your colleagues. That's it. Thank you.